When you see this video, it's going to be Friday the 25th, and of course that means we have Halloween coming up. The raid Bastion is looking absolutely fantastic. They've done some visual stuff here that looks very, very cool inside the game, and we're going to be talking about Corvis the Corruptor today and doing a champion showcase slash guide on this guy and why I think he's so fantastic. So if you've been playing the game for any amount of time, you probably heard of Venomage, Eurogrim, those sorts of champions that place a ton of poisons and just, you know, do great things for your account, right? So another fantastic example of that would be the Skinwalker champion Akemptum, who's able to help place some poisons, detonate them, all that sort of good stuff. And of course, these champions make it very easy to progress through content and do it solo because they're placing basically AoE damage. They can heal, regen set, all that sort of good stuff. So what does Corvis do? What makes him special? Well, he is essentially the legendary version of a champion like Venomage. Now, that's not to say that he replaces her. They're both going to have a lot of use in certain areas of the game. But we're going to be going over his kit today, talking about him a little bit, and seeing what makes him so darn good. So when I first pulled Corvis, I was very undecided whether I was going to be excited about it or not, just because, again, he did seem like one of those champions where an epic could do his job. But I finally decided to build him out, and I am definitely not regretting it. Let's go ahead, take a look at his kit just to start. He has an attack 1 enemy A1, 60% chance of placing a decreased attack damage based on defense. The multiplier on this is going to be a 3.1 times excuse me, defense multiplier. There might be some intermittent coughing throughout the video. I'm still feeling a little bit under the weather, so don't mind that too much if it happens. 3.1 times defense multiplier is considered average. Not too crazy things coming out of this in terms of damage. However, a 60% chance to place a debuff, which is going to decrease the enemy's output of damage by 50%, is pretty insane. So it's a very solid A1 in my opinion. A2 attacks all enemies 2 times. The first hit increasing the duration of all enemy debuffs by 1 turn, and the second hit also increases the duration of all ally buffs by 1 turn. So you can imagine how, if you have, for example, continuous heals out there on your team and then poisons on the enemy team or hexes on the enemy team, those sorts of things, he's going to be extending the duration of both of those, which is absolutely fantastic. This has a 1.9 times defense multiplier times 2, so we're at about a 3.8 times defense multiplier, which does give it a strong rating overall according to Hell Hades, but you're definitely not building this guy to be your primary nuker by any means. And his A3 is going to be a field research, 4-turn cooldown, AoE times 2, once again, each hit having a 100% chance of placing 2 5% poison debuffs for 2 turns. After attacking, places a 25% poison sensitivity debuff on enemies under 2 or more poison debuffs. Now this is going to have a 2 times damage multiplier, so it's going to be about a 4 times damage multiplier in total. Again, not a crazy amount of damage coming from this guy, but it is what it is. In total, this is going to be placing 4 5% poison debuffs on the enemy plus a poison sensitivity, and you'll really see how that comes in useful in one of the teams that we showcase him in here in a little bit. He's going to have Curious Draw excuse me, as his passive. So decreases the damage enemies under poison debuffs inflict 5% less damage per poison debuff, stacks up to 25%. This is just straight up saying, hey, you're doing 25% less damage to my team, and that is on top of his decreased attack on the A1, of course. He has an ally defense in all battles by 30% aura as well. Overall, I think this guy is a very strong champion. You can, of course, get significant use out of him inside the Demon Lord clan boss. Dragon's Lair, he's absolutely fantastic. These ratings are pretty accurate, I would say. He is a sensational champion, right? And if you actually have him paired with somebody like a Teox inside Arena as well, when he places all these debuffs, he can basically boost the hell out of your Teox's turn meter and give him essentially an instant turn, which is very cool. Let's go ahead and take a look at how we have him built. Now, these are the stats that we have him in. 63,000 HP, 3,400 defense, 198 on the speed, 245 resistance, 462 on the accuracy. I'm going to be showcasing him inside Dragon's Lair, so this is how he looks. Really, the only things that change is a little bit more accuracy, a little bit more resistance. You certainly don't need these craziest stats on him to get use out of him, though, so this is a very much a late game build, and we can really see the use out of something like a Feral Ring coming in and giving us that 40% accuracy on its own. Now, additionally, he is also built inside a regeneration as well as an immortal set, which is very, very cool. So he's going to be healing up and staying nice and healthy the entire time. Now, let's go ahead and let's take a look at his Masteries and my recommendations for those. So for Masteries, I do have him coming down to Eagle Eye to get an additional 50 accuracy. I do also have him built out in Master Hexer, so he has a chance to increase the duration of those poisons, as well as the poison sensitivities, the decrease attacks, all those sorts of good things. Considering he's already a debuff extender, right, it's just a great combination to have. We do also have him with Lore of Steel, so that the HP boosts from regeneration, for example, are going to go ahead and be a little bit stronger there. And then we do have him with Evil Eye as well, as always on most of my support champions, so we can decrease the enemy's turn meter when we hit them. And I do also have him built out inside counterattack masteries. So essentially, if he loses a bunch of HP, excuse me, or if somebody's placing a crowd control on your team, he's going to come in and help to counterattack, place that decrease attack on his A1, which is quite nice. The rest of the masteries are very basic. Don't go ahead and copy this, just essentially use this as kind of a baseline, right? And then kind of tweak it for what your account needs. So for example, if you're not really focused on high accuracy for Sidious and Tronos or something like that, you might ignore the support tree and you might come down to War Master instead, just so he does a little bit more damage, right? So to speed up your runs, just kind of take this build with a grain of salt. Now, in terms of blessings, if you don't have him fully awakened, what I would recommend is going to be Cruelty. Cruelty, since he's doing a lot of AoEs, he's going to decrease the enemy's defense, right? Which is going to help your other damage-dealing champions going. And that's basically if you're not relying on his poisons, right? So if you also have regular damage dealers in the composition. Now, if you don't have other damage dealers and you are just relying on him as your damage dealer, if he's soloing, those sorts of things, I would actually recommend going ahead and getting Nature's Wrath. And the reason for that is at a full awakening, he's going to increase the damage inflicted by himself by 5% for every debuff he places, up to 30%, right? So just straight up doing 30% more damage is going to be pretty fantastic. He is, of course, built, not built, rather, he is, of course, based on defense damage, right? So the more you're building him to survive, the more damage he can output, which is fantastic, because especially for late or end game players, they're going to be able to build him to do damage, as well as survive and solo content. Let's go ahead and let's see him in action and just how useful he can be. So we're going to go into Dragon, and we're going to go into Stage 10, and we're going to run it with this team right here. Now, I would say, and I would argue, that this is a very free-to-play friendly or low-spend friendly composition. The reason being, we do have an epic, although it's a void epic. We have Mithrala, who you'll get by just farming, you know, Hydra over time. We have Newt, who is a fusion. We have Lady of Erith, who is the only one that wasn't a fusion, but she is a champion that's been around for quite some time, and you can also have a champion that essentially does the same thing as her in Apothecary, right? So just replace her with Apothecary. She's basically just a legendary version of him. And then, of course, we do have Corvis, the Corruptor, in here as well. How does this work? Well, Akemptum is an interesting champion where he has a passive where he's going to have a 100% chance of inflicting damage from one poison debuff to all enemies under a hex whenever their allies receive damage from a poison. Akemptum also brings the poison, and he brings a hex and he brings a poison on the A1. So we technically don't need Mithrala in here, but she comes in for a little bit of a cleanse on the wave 3. If you're interested in replicating this team, excuse me, I'll go ahead and show you the AI presets. This is essentially how it is here. We have Akemptum with his hex turned off, just because we do want him to use the A1 where he's going to go ahead and spread debuffs, right? We have Mithrala coming in, and she is actually able to go ahead and place the hex. And then we do, of course, actually have her saving her A3 on wave 2 so that she has it available for the cleanse. And they are fast at these speeds, so I do have her set to open with her A2, which is going to place the increased defense and everything like that. Corvis essentially is just doing whatever he wants, except I have him, of course, prioritizing the poison ability. He has this interesting little feature where he tries to open with the debuff extension, which doesn't work the best because, of course, he doesn't have his poisons out there already, so I just decided to correct that. Lady of Erith doing whatever the hell she wants. And then, of course, Newt is just saving his blessed bash for once a week. Excuse me, once a week to the boss. Now, I have turned off super raids. We're going to go ahead. We're going to see how this works, essentially. Now, of course, like I mentioned, you can use this champion as a very proficient solo champion. You don't necessarily have to run him inside this team composition. he has the stats where he can most likely survive. You could, you know, essentially replace 2 of these champions and use them as food instead, right? So for example, you could get rid of the Newt, you could put a food champion there instead. Now what you'll see here is because of a Kemptom's passive, every time somebody under a poison debuff gets a turn, everybody's receiving those ticks of poison, which is absolutely fantastic. So you can see everybody's HP is just getting chunked down here, which is absolutely amazing. We have so much crowd control on this as well. So we of course have Mithrala with the petrification. We have Newt coming in with his freezes on the A1. We have the decreased attack, and we have the damage reductions coming in from Corvis as well. That this team is essentially just unbeatable, right? When it comes down to it, like, they're not going to have enough damage output to really do anything. Not to mention, even if they do damage us, we also have the heals, the shields, the cleanse, the strengthen, and the cooldown reset coming in from Lady of Erith as well, who I think is actually a very underrated champion. I did a guide on her at one point there on my channel too, that you can still find it, so I definitely recommend checking that out. I have her in quite an interesting build, if I do say so myself. So, and she got buffed since that video as well, so she's only gotten stronger. But this is very, very nice. Like I say, as you can see, essentially everybody's just taking those poison ticks. We're already on to wave 2, which I would say this is pretty much the fastest you're going to get through this content, unless you have a team that is solely dedicated to just farming Dragon Hard 10, you know, as quick as possible. There are certainly faster ways to do this. So for example, if you have a Seer composition or Taurus or something like that that just can come in and place buffs and then detonate them, or of course if you have like a Siegfried or a Teox or something like that, right, there's going to be faster ways to do it. But at the end of the day, the way I always see it when I'm creating content is if you had those teams, you probably wouldn't be watching this video on Corvis. So I want to give you content that's going to help players of basically all levels, and essentially just help you progress your account kind of no matter where you are, right? Because it's cool to show the best content in the game, or to show the best champions in the game running through certain content, but at the end of the day, it not only helps like 1% of the player base, right, it's not really the most useful for anybody. So this is why we do videos in this style, I suppose. And we are about 2.5 minutes in. Cardinal is dead, but she's still standing there for some reason. Just had to pause the video there to get a nice cough in, so don't mind me. And we're finally onto the dragon, so you can essentially see how this team works against the dragon. Of course, now Newt is absolutely fantastic. He helps out a lot here too. We get those poisons coming in, and then of course now Mithrala is going to be able to go ahead and do her cleanse right away as well. And then we do have Lady of Erith, who is going to help those cooldown reductions, which will be quite nice. Now, I don't think Mithrala actually had her cleanse set up properly there, so she hasn't done it yet, which is a bit of a shame. You can see how many poisons we have stacked on the boss, so he's not even going to get to do his Scorch ability, which is pretty fantastic. It's not Scorch on the hard mode, it's Toxic Incineration. I was thinking of the normal mode. But yeah, like it's a very, very good composition, and as you can see, really nobody's in too much danger of actually dying here. Lady of Erith is looking a little bit low, but she's going to come in, fully cleanse herself, block damage, and a heal, right? So she's fantastic. Newt comes in with his Blessed Bash to finish it off. This team composition, of course, is going to work without Newt. However, it'll just be a little bit slower. Now, you can see Corvis only doing 2.6 million damage, and you might think, well, actually, he's kind of trash. But keep in mind, probably 80 to 90% of the poisons that were placed in that battle were placed by Corvis, right? And a Kemptom is the one that is detonating those poisons and damaging everybody else. So a Kemptom, I would say, stole quite a bit of the damage from Corvis, essentially. And another thing to consider is if you have champions that are able to do poison detonation, Corvis is going to be a fantastic champion to set up those particular teams as well. Let me know down below if you use Corvis, where you use him, how you have him built, all that sort of good stuff. I'd love to hear about it. And as always, thank you guys for watching the video. I'll see you next time.